Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Van Jones, an environmental advocate, social justice activist, attorney, and co-founder of 3 nonprofit organizations. In 1996, Jones founded the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, a group that has led efforts to encourage government to fund inner-city schools and job training rather than juvenile detention facilities. After the catastrophe of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Jones co-founded Color of Change, an advocacy group that aims to strengthen the political voice of African Americans. In 2007, he founded Green for All, an organization dedicated to building an inclusive green economy strong enough to lift people out of poverty. Jones's first book, The Green Collar Economy, 2008, outlines his plan for solving the biggest issues facing the country, the failing economy and the devastated environment. He contends that invention and investment will lift the country out of a pollution-based gray economy and up to a healthy new green economy. Jones served in the Obama administration in 2009 as the Special Advisor for Green Jobs, Enterprise, and Innovation at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. He is currently a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C., and a senior policy advisor at Green for All. He also holds a joint appointment at Princeton University as a distinguished visiting fellow in both the Center for African American Studies and in the program in Science, Technology, and Environmental Policy at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. Jones gave a talk titled Beyond Green Jobs, The Next American Economy at the UO in Eugene on January 24, 2011, and again at the UO in Portland the following day. Jones visited the UO as the Oregon Humanities Center 2010-11 Tzedek Professor in the Humanities and as part of our Sustenance series. Van, thank you for coming.
Honored to be here.
As I mentioned to you, we've been working on getting you out to Eugene for 3 years now, so we're delighted that we actually have you to speak with us.
Well, I appreciate your patience and your persistence, and it's an honor to be here. So,
well, most of Eugene and most of Portland is really looking forward to your talks as well, and I know that we'll have a big audience for this interview. I wanted to start, Van, just with the book, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I'm going to show this to the camera so that we can get a good shot of it. One thing I wanted to begin with was to ask you to define what green-collar jobs are.
Sure. Well, the best way to think about it is a green-collar job is a blue-collar job that's been upgraded and updated to better respect the environment. So if you think about solar panel installers or people who manufacture wind turbines or who upgrade the grid so it's a smarter grid, all the people who are working who are making the country smarter with regard to the environment are green-collar workers. And if we are going to have a middle class in this century, a big chunk of the middle class will be people who are working in the new energy sector, the organic food and new food sector, the entire effort, which is now becoming more important, so-called blue-green jobs around water, basically rebuilding, retrofitting, repowering America to be cleaner and greener. Those are everything that's good for the environment is a job. This whole fight about jobs versus the environment is largely outdated. Solar panels don't put themselves up. Homes don't retrofit themselves to waste less energy. The reality is that as you begin to look at all the opportunities to make the environment better, it's nothing but jobs and contracts and entrepreneurial opportunities. And so that's what the book's about.
It's a great, catchy phrase. It means a whole lot in 3 short words. Your name's very heavily associated with it. Did you coin the term?
I did not coin the term green-collar jobs. There was a book written actually about some of the timber battles here in the Pacific Northwest that was called Green-Collar Jobs, and it was about the forests and how to combine some of those interests. So when I first started using the term green-collar jobs, I Googled the term, and it had been used 17 times in the whole world. That book, and then I think the Green Party in Canada had used it, and the Green Party in New Zealand. And other than that, it had never been used. So I did not coin the term, but I was the person who championed it. And I think if you Google it today, you're several million hits. So I take some credit for spreading the virus.
Most of those several million hits include your name right next to it.
So
Yeah, it's your term now.
Yeah.
Van, you started as a prison reform advocate.
Sure.
And you made this switch into an area with which you're very largely identified now. How did you make the transition from one to the other?
Well, you know, for me, the values are the same. I don't think we have any throwaway resources or species or materials. I don't think we have any throwaway people either. And if we're going to have an environmental movement that says, even an aluminum can can't be thrown away, it's got a future. The aluminum can's future is more important than its past. Let's give the aluminum can a better future. Then I think we should say the same thing about kids in urban environments who get in trouble. Sometimes they get in trouble doing the same stuff that kids are doing at Ivy League campuses. I went to an Ivy League campus and I saw way more drug use on the campus than I ever saw in the community. Never saw the cops come in and kick in the doors. So I have always kind of thought, okay, look, it's all sacred. It's all precious. We don't have any throwaway stuff. We don't have any throwaway people. If we have a second chance for aluminum cans, we could probably have a second chance for people in prison. But I started on the prison side. And then I really essentially burned out. I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit. You put your face up against the furnace of some of the tough problems in urban America, year after year. I've still gone to way more funerals for kids than I've ever gone to graduations. I mean, and I've been out of that work for 10 years. And I speak at commencement addresses. I mean, so, there's a whole lot of pain in this country that really never gets looked at. You spend your days kind of with your face kind of pushed up against that furnace every day. It takes a lot out of you. You give a lot, you gain a lot in terms of wisdom. It takes a lot out of you. I burned out, and it was in trying to get more healthy myself, trying to find, some peace or joy that I discovered this whole green economy where people were, focusing on organic food and getting healthy and yoga and all these different things in the Bay Area. And I actually started getting involved with that stuff, and it actually made my life better. And I said, geez, this should be available to everybody. Why should I have to drive from Oakland, California, all the way over to Marin County to have clean air, clean water, and good food, and some inner peace? Shouldn't we have green for all, not just green for some? And so that kind of began my journey.
You make the argument that low-income people of color have historically borne the brunt of environmental harm because of the neighborhoods they live in, because of where we put pollutants. Is that also a contributing factor to this? Mm-hmm.
Well, I definitely don't think we want to live in a country that has a certain subsection of our population that gets hit first and worst for everything negative environmentally, and then benefits last and least from everything good environmentally. I mean, I think it's two sides of the same coin. The same communities where you have asthma and cancer and no really good food options, so therefore you've got diabetes and this sort of stuff. Those are the same neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, that are the last to get the solar panels and the hybrid cars and whatever. So to me, it's two sides of the same coin. The environmental justice movement has primarily worked to try to say, don't pollute our children just because they're poor. Don't poison our kids just because they live in communities where there's a disproportionate number of people of color. Don't put the dumps next to us. Don't give us equal protection from the downside of our industrial society. That's the environmental justice movement. But it's always had inside of it this other cry, which is don't pollute anybody, don't poison anybody. And if you think about it from that point of view, that's also a cry for new technologies that are wiser, that are better, that are healthier. It's also a cry for equal access to those technologies. So if Dr. King were here, he would say, let's have equal protection from the worst, equal opportunity to the best. Let's build a green wave that can lift all boats, right? Let's not have eco-apartheid, where you have ecological haves, ecological have-nots. Let's have eco-equity. And so I feel like I was born in 1968. That's the year that Dr. King was killed, Bobby Kennedy was killed. And I feel like I'm trying to continue their legacies in this new era, which is an ecological era. And so that's kind of the journey I'm on.
I've heard you talk at some length about the significance for you, the symbolism of having been born in '68. It sounds like you really are deliberately picking up that burden as your responsibility.
Well, for some reason, the year I was born was such a tumultuous year. And, when you're a little kid, you're trying to figure out who you are. And, you really want to know about, who your grandparents were and, that kind of stuff. But I was born in '68, so every time you open up a history book, you're in second grade, third grade, some crazy thing happened the year you were born. And so it really kind of got my attention. I have a kind of historical orientation anyway. But I feel like somebody tried to kill off hope in '68, the year I was born. They killed Bobby Kennedy, they killed Dr. King, the Democratic Convention in Chicago was bloody. A lot of people say that was kind of the end of the '60s, the beginning of some other walk in the wilderness. It took 40 years from '68 to 2008 with Barack Obama for hope to come back in America as a mass phenomenon. In the '80s, you had Reverend Jackson talking about keep hope alive, but he was talking about that because the hope was fading. It took 40 years, like a 40-year walk in the wilderness, I think, for America after those assassinations for us to kind of come back around. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to the politics of hope, no matter how much the politics of hatred becomes fashionable. I don't think you can let the politics of hope die on your watch. Because, if it dies, if we let ourselves get discouraged, if we go over to cynicism, it's going to be another 40 years before the country stands back up and lets itself be idealistic. See, I don't think the main battle in America is between the right versus the left. I think that is just I think that's a puppet show. I think the real battle is between idealism and cynicism. And the stereotypical left is too cynical about markets. Anything market, anything business, they hate it. The stereotypical right is too cynical about government, and especially our government. The federal government is this terrible thing, and it's like, well, hold on a second. Most people, trying to solve the problems that we have today, know that you're going to need the best of markets and the best of government to get the job done. And so it's a puppet show to have these two extremes screaming at each other on TV all the time, when we need our best entrepreneurs, our best innovators, our best ideas, to innovate and invest and invent our way out of these problems. At the same time, you got to have smart government to put down the rules, to make sure the rules are enforced. Markets work according to rules. Right now, the rules are wacky. Wall Street is being run like a casino with no ethics, no morals, no oversight, even though we pass this one little bill. That's got to change. Our biggest companies, our energy companies, can pollute for free. They can dump megatons of carbon, planet-baking carbon, into the atmosphere for free. You can't litter on the sidewalk without paying a fine, and these guys get away with that. Those are just wacky rules. And so you've got to change the rules. You've got to have government to get the best out of your markets. But at the same time, you've got to be able to, once you have those rules in place, let the innovation rip through. Let people make money. Let people create new products and services. One of the things I get passionate about is people say, we believe in the free market. We want the free market. I say, me too. I like it so much, I'd like to see a free market in, say, energy, where you have basically a monopoly of fossil fuel interests and big utility companies that dictate to you how much you're going to pay for energy, when you're going to pay for it, how many asthma inhalers you're going to have in your community as a result of those dirty power plants, and you just have to be an energy serf for the rest of your life. I would say, let's create an environment where every American has the right and the liberty to be an energy producer. You could put a solar panel on your house, get the financing for it, put a wind turbine in your backyard, sell that power onto the grid, compete with anybody in the world, create an organization of your neighbors, power your own neighborhood, power the neighborhood down the street, and actually have a free market in energy. That is actually trying to bust up a state-protected monopoly on the part of these fossil fuel companies and create more innovation. So is that left? Is that right? Is that Democrat? Is that Republican? It's just good for America. But it's being idealistic enough to believe that we could get those rules right, we could get that innovation right, and we could make a difference. That's where I think we've got to go as a country.
One of the lines you take to explain this, that it's not a question of which political party happens to hold the majority at a given moment, is a kind of an appeal to patriotism. You use patriotism actively as a principle behind all of this. Is that based in what you've just explained, the no political party line?
Well, you know, it's funny because the basic kind of common ground that we have as Americans, if we took it seriously, a lot of the problems that are considered, you know, partisan problems would just go away. You know, liberty and justice for all. I mean, it didn't say liberty and justice for all except for the gay people, or liberty and justice for all except for those dang immigrants. I mean, it says liberty and justice for all. So let's treat everybody with dignity, everybody with respect. That's patriotism. America the Beautiful, right? I mean, we have our kids singing the song "America the Beautiful." Well, I mean, don't call yourself an environmentalist. Just say I'm trying to defend America's beauty from the clear cutters and the oil spillers and these kind of people who are behaving irresponsibly. Of course, we have to use those resources, but we got to use them in a way that respects America's beauty. So, for me, if the common language in our society supports doing right by people and right by the planet, that's just another reason to get excited about it. I think that progressives in particular are way too sheepish about our love of our country. I'm a proud progressive. You know, you can't do bipartisan. It's hard to do bipartisan if you aren't first a partisan. So I'm a proud progressive. You know, my family's been in a Democratic Party as long as I can know anything about it. But you know, you take that progressive tradition, which I think is the best of American idealism, and then you're too sheepish and oh well, and then the other side just whips you to death and says, well, you know, they don't even love the country. Well, I mean, so you can say anything you want to about me. You can't challenge me on my love of country. I was out there trying to make liberty and justice for all a reality in some of these toughest neighborhoods where some of my critics would never even walk. And so I won't take second place to anybody on that. But I think that now we have a chance to have America be a world leader, but not in war and pollution and incarceration rates and some of the downside of the American story. But the upside, being a moral leader, we have the genius of all people in one country. Every color, every faith, every gender, every sexuality expression, every kind of human lives in this country. We get up every day and we make it work. And we should celebrate that diversity, show that we can use that diversity to come up with even more innovative solutions, solve tough problems, and then show a diverse world how you do that. That's my version of patriotism. For the people on the left, you go, oh, no, I worry about that. The best gift you can give the world is a better America. If what you're mainly concerned about is the world, I'm just a world citizen. Fine. The best gift you can give the world is a better America. So whether you're a patriot or some kind of global citizen, we should still be doing the same thing.
I love the fact that you use patriotism with no embarrassment. There's nothing cringeworthy in your use of that term.
No, not at all.
Well before you ended up in the White House in 2009, you were instrumental in getting some legislation passed. I'm referring to the Green Jobs Act of 2007 while Bush was still in office. What was the impact of that legislation?
Well, you know, at first it was zero because it turns out, you know, I'd never worked in D.C. before. So it turns out that you pass a bill and everybody gets excited and you've authorized all this new stuff, but then it turns out you have to go back around the whole process to get the funds appropriated. So they authorize all this stuff, but then who's going to pay for it? A whole different process. And so we had to go back and try to get the funds appropriated, and President Bush, unfortunately, gave us not a penny. But then the next year, President Obama included the Green Jobs Act, which was at first was just $425 million, in the recovery package, the so-called stimulus bill, at $500 million. And so $500 million has now been spent to train new green workers. We have in America now 80,000 workers in our wind industry. That's as many workers as we have coal miners in America. We got 80,000 coal miners. They're our heroes. They risk their lives, they risk their lungs, they risk their limbs every day to keep the lights turned on. They're our heroes. But guess what? We got 80,000 workers in the wind industry as well, doing it a new way. We have 46,000 workers in our solar industry. The president's tax policy saved 3,600 renewable energy companies in 46 states plus DC, all across America. And the Green Jobs Act is a part of training up the workforce to make all that stuff happen. So I'm very proud of being a part of the one part of the American economy that, even with Congress missing in action, even with the economy, the rest of the economy in the garbage can, has still managed to make real progress. And if we can ever get Congress to be on the side of the solution and not just the pollution, we'll make even more progress.
In 2009, you had one heck of a year.
I sure did.
From the sublime to the ridiculous, the best of times, the worst of times.
Sure.
You've described it as a year of hope and heartbreak.
Sure.
You said after you left the Obama administration, you threw yourself a 6-month pity party.
Yes.
But you came back.
Yes.
You're setting an example for what you want the rest of us to do. Is that right?
Sure. You know, I had all my dreams come true and all my nightmares come true in the same, 18-month period. You know, I had a new baby. My younger son was born in 2008. Best-selling book. First book came out, bestseller. Launched a new organization, Green for All, went really well. White House appointment in 2009. The Time magazine called me one of the 100 most influential people in the world. All that stuff, and then had all of the pain and suffering and the slings and arrows of the contact sport that American politics has become. And so, I understand, the disappointment and frustration some people have about how tough change has been. The hope was kind of, seems easy in hindsight. The change is tougher. But, this country's trying to absorb a lot of change right now, absorb a lot of factors. And you got to let that process work its way through. You had the economy fall out from under a lot of people. People are going to react. You have a lot of demographic changes. Country's getting browner. I don't know, people feel concerned about that, some people say. People now want to get married in non-traditional ways. I feel concerned about that. Got this president, he looks different, his name is different. You got to let people have those jitters and then stick with the country, keep being positive, focus on the solutions. Eventually, all this stuff is going to work out.
You have a gift for language, and I know you really appreciate language. I've heard you explain your love for language and then say that on your iPod you've got Churchill and
Yes.
Reagan and Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King. You come up with phrases that people can hang on to and use over and over again. How can we be more beautiful? Your year of hope and heartbreak. No one becomes as good a speaker as you are without thinking about it and learning how to do it. How have you trained yourself to be such an incredible rhetorician?
Well, I feel like if you want to be a good musician, you got to listen to a lot of music. You can't just sit in your, little stool out on the front porch and play your guitar. You've got to listen to the best music. And if you want to be a good surgeon, you've got to be around people who are involved in that. I listen to speeches all the time. There are only a few people who stand up in front of large crowds with a microphone and know accompaniment. Preachers, politicians, poets, professors, very stand-up comics, very small number of people who do that. Scary stuff to do. So I try to study the best. And, I know that if you're going to give a speech, people are going to be sitting there. They're giving you their time. It's the most valuable thing they can give you. If I steal your purse, your wallet, your laptop, you'll be mad at me. You can get another one, though. If I waste an hour of your time and I don't say anything interesting, if I don't get your attention, I don't use that time well, you'll never get that hour back. Or the hour it took you to get there, or the hour to go back home mad at me. So if I'm going to take those 3 hours away from you, I want to give you something back. And, Michael Jordan is somebody who I just admire so much. He said every time he went out to play, everybody says, "Oh, you're the greatest, you're the best." He goes, "You know what? I'm lacing up my shoes. 80,000 people out there. Somebody out there never saw me before. They're never going to see me again. I want them to think I'm great. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to play for them." And that's how I approach it. When I stand up and talk, I'm talking for that person who's never going to hear me again. I want them to get something out of it. And I think people like Bobby Kennedy, Dr. King, Churchill, Reagan, oh my God, Reagan, who makes the hardest stuff look so easy, you know, they had that attitude. They wanted to make a meaningful contribution in that aspect of their role.
We only have a couple of minutes left, Van, so I'm going to, rather than launch another big question, I wanted to ask you a more personal one. You have two little boys.
I sure do.
You're a proponent of Sesame Street, of the values, of the social rules, all the useful stuff we can get from programs like that.
Yeah.
You're clearly, for the most part, invested in civility in this dialogue. And I'm curious, do you really believe that we haven't succumbed to despair? What do you think your kids are going to be looking at 20 years from now?
Oh, you know, they'll have every problem in the world, but not these. We'll have solved these in terms of the basic change from kind of dirty industrial model that's, you know, really wasteful and disrespectful of people and the planet. We'll be on a much different trajectory for them. You know, every generation has a bunch of problems and says, you know, why did my parents leave me these problems? But these problems we're not going to leave our kids. The country just has to catch up to itself. You had one party that had all the control in 2004, the other party had all the control in 2008. Now we're back to divided government. Both kids have their own toys to play with, okay? So everything can calm down, and now we can start trying to cooperate.
Okay, so there really is reason for optimism.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, the best people, many of the best people in America have yet to be heard from. These economic crises tend to bring people out in waves. And so, sometimes people come out fearful, then they come out hopeful, but the best people in America, including a lot of your listeners, you know, they haven't given their all yet, and when they do, we're going to be just fine.
We're going to stop there for now. I'm going to invite listeners to listen to your talks online. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more, and thank you so much for spending a half hour with us.
I appreciate the opportunity.
We've been speaking with Van Jones, an environmental advocate, social justice activist, attorney, and a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. Jones gave a talk titled Beyond Green Jobs, The Next American Economy at the UO in Eugene on January 24th, and again in Portland on January 25th. Jones visited the UO as the Oregon Humanities Center 2010-11 Tzedek Professor in the Humanities and as part of our Sustenance series. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.